Hello and welcome to this special interview with the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Mr. Wamkele Mene. So welcome to Algeria first, and thanks for accepting our invitation to the Algerian television. So the first thing, or the first question is, what's your impression after visiting the National Production Fair?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. We visited the exhibition today with His Excellency the Minister of Trade. And what struck me is that all of the exhibitions, except maybe one, all of them was local production. Whether it was air conditioners, technology like laptops, all of it was locally produced, components, innovation. And this is very, very encouraging, especially when, as part of one of the objectives of ZLECAF, is local production and export of local production.
So, in your opinion, the Algerian products can compete with the other products coming from other countries?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think what we saw today is capacity to, very, very high degree of capacity to produce and manufacture goods, high quality goods, for export to the rest of the African continent. And I think that what's clear is that if we reduce the barriers to intra-Africa trade, the tariff barriers and the non-tariff barriers, we will see a very, very drastic increase in intra-Africa trade.
You know, Algeria has adopted the new strategy is based on the promotion and the diversification of its resources instead of relying on oil dependency. What do you think of this experience?
I think it's absolutely the correct strategy to follow. A significant percentage of Algeria's export earnings comes from hydrocarbons, gas, and petroleums. Now, in the long term, obviously that's not sustainable because you are very, very vulnerable to externalities, global externalities. Could be COVID, it could be geopolitical tensions. All of these things are not good for over-dependence or over-reliance on one or two sectors. So I think the government is absolutely correct to pursue diversification of the economy and diversification of export markets. So what we see today is an example of that, focusing on manufacturing and high value-add goods.
In an earlier statement, you said that Africa lacks infrastructure, and including them, of course, roads. And Algeria has heavily invested in this domain. We have the roads linking us with Mauritania, another one with Libya, and the biggest one is that's going to Nigeria. So how do you think this road can enhance trade in Africa and the Algerian trade and products as well?
The African Development Bank estimates that the infrastructure deficit in Africa is $150 billion annually, or even more, slightly more than that. Infrastructure that supports trade is a critical component of boosting intra-Africa trade and creating a single market. Now, we can rely on African Development Bank, on Afrexim Bank, on Africa Finance Corporation to finance the infrastructure deficit that exists. But we also have to rely on national governments. And so I think the point you make about Algeria investing in the infrastructure, the trade corridors that will connect Algeria to Mauritania and thereby Senegal, that is very, very important. Because without trade supporting infrastructure, we will not be able to improve and enhance the percentage of intra-Africa trade. So we absolutely require national governments to complement the African development finance institutions in terms of investing in infrastructure. And I think that complementarity of crowding in investment in infrastructure in the way that Algeria is doing, Egypt is doing, this is absolutely the contribution that is needed for us to advance if we want to see the difference, a positive difference in intra-Africa trade.
Another positive and important element is the border crossings. And you know Algeria has crossing points with Mauritania, another one with Libya. To what extent do you think that this crossing point can activate trade in Africa or inter-African trade?
We have called in the past for more efficient transit at borders, whether it is transit of goods or transit of persons. You will have heard an announcement recently by His Excellency President Kagame, as well as His Excellency President Ruto, where they announced that respectively Rwanda and Kenya will allow all Africans visa-free entry into Kenya and Rwanda. That, of course, is a very, very, it's a milestone. If we can get free movement of persons in Africa, particularly business persons, we will be making a significant contribution to stimulating trade. Now, at our borders, what we have observed, and by the way, we've been to all of the trade corridors, including here in North Africa. What we've observed are two things. One, that the drivers of Africa's economy are the informal traders and smallholder traders. And second, the economic activity in the ecosystem of the border is driven by these informal traders. And it is these informal traders who are facilitating the cross-border trade and the increased numbers of trade. So to the extent that a particular border crossing can be made more efficient, that facilitates the trade that we want to see, particularly the trade of informal traders. In the agreement establishing the AFCFTA, we have the annex on transit, we have the annex on customs harmonization, as well as an annex on trade facilitation. And these three instruments read together seek to create an enabling environment for our traders to transit, our informal traders to transit more efficiently so that we reduce the cost of trade.
Algeria, I think, is moving in the right direction. Why? Because it has opened many bank branches in several African countries, including Senegal and Mauritania as well. To what extent these banks will enhance trade and facilitate the commercial transactions between African countries?
Well, this afternoon, I mentioned in my statement that from 1963, when the OAU was established, before it became the African Union, we made as a continent very, very bold declarations of intent for us as Africans to be free from colonialists. And we achieved that. We also made very, very bold declarations of economic freedom and establishment of a continental market. Not achieved that objective. We are moving towards it. Now, where a region or a country expands its investments or commercial presence into other parts of the continent, I believe that that is advancing that objective, long-standing objective of integration of our market, long-standing objective of creating a single market in Africa. So I commend the government of Algeria for taking these steps, because we don't require only political intent. We require concrete steps to see the results of an integrated market. We know also that the airline is beginning to expand to connect Algeria's.
In the same context, yes. Besides roads, we have new flights being opened, for instance, with Johannesburg, with Addis Ababa recently, and
Correct.
with Douala in Cameroon. So I think this will ease the movement of goods and persons as well in the African continent.
Correct. And if you, before the introduction by the government of Algeria of these connectivity routes, if you were in Johannesburg and you wanted to come to Algiers, you have to connect in France or Dubai or any other. So in a way, the colonial trade pattern remained, because we were still having to go to Paris to come to Algiers. Now, with the introduction of these routes, I don't think it's just connectivity in terms of routes. It's actually, it is giving meaning to that political statement or political intent of an integrated continent. That's what we have to continue to invest in. So I commend the government for having taken that step, and the airline, in the example you mentioned of the banks and the connectivity in terms of air traffic.
Another point of connectivity as well. You know, there is a maritime line between Algiers and Nouakchott as well. Another boost for the inter-African trade as well.
And actually, we should extend that across all the way down the east coast of the African continent and the west coast of the African continent. We have examples of exporters who would be exporting or using maritime routes, containers, to go from one African country to the other, but they first have to start in Shanghai before they come back to the African continent, because of the cost and because of the absence of maritime transport cargo services. So we've got to create that market, and our development finance institutions have to step up and invest in creating those maritime transport routes. If we don't create that market ourselves, nobody's going to do it. So the government of Algeria decides, yes, we're going to ensure that there's a maritime transport route between Algeria and Mauritania, and that's commendable. We have to do that across, around the African continent, and our development finance institutions must step forward to provide the investment that is required to complement what Algeria has already started.
You know, still with Algeria, which has allotted an important financial package amounting of $1 billion to back and support the African development project. What's the feedback of this initiative among the African countries?
Well, the feedback is very positive, because I think that, as I said earlier, we have to finance our own development, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is improving our export capacity, whether it is connectivity, airline connectivity. All of these things have to be financed by us, either by African institutions or African governments, or both. So I think Algeria is taking the lead in doing exactly that, in financing Africa's development, and financing Africa's development in a way in which we set the priorities as Africans. We talked earlier about the trade corridor that Algeria is financing between Mauritania, that will give you access all the way into Senegal and other West African countries as you go south of Senegal. I don't think that we should be relying only on the World Bank and all of these other institutions to finance this development. We should do it ourselves, because that gives us the political independence to chart the trajectory that we want to see and to identify what are our priorities as Africans.
How do you assess Algeria's efforts so far in terms of promoting trade, investment and exchanges in the continent?
We just had a very good discussion now about with SAFEX about the trade fairs and the exhibitions that are convened here. We have agreed to work together to convene or to support. ZLECAF Secretariat will support and participate in the 54th edition of the International Trade Fair of Algeria, which will be held in June, as you may be aware. I think these are the tools and these are the initiatives that are absolutely critical to creating that trade connectivity amongst businesses, governments, small, medium enterprises. So we have to work together, and many African countries, of course, around the continent are looking at various models for providing tools that will ensure the intra-Africa trade that we want to see. So next year, in June, we will be participating fully as a ZLECAF Secretariat in the trade fair, the Algeria International Trade Fair.
Well, during your stay and visit to Algeria, you held several meetings with the high-ranking officials, Algerian officials. What are the facilitations you got from them to promote the ZLECAF Secretariat?
I'm very encouraged by the visit here. We have been discussing this visit with the Minister of Trade for some time. I'm happy that it has happened. We have met high-ranking private sector officials, government officials. 2 or 3 points have come very clearly. The first point is Algeria is ready to take advantage of ZLECAF, either from an export or import point of view. And this is critical because it means that Algeria will be one of the countries that are early beneficiary countries in the implementation of ZLECAF. The second point that has come very, very strongly to the fore is the intra-Africa Trade Fair, which the government is taking very, very seriously, and the government is intending to make sure that it becomes a success. And we had very good discussions with the Minister of Trade this morning, exactly on this point of the intra-Africa Trade Fair and its importance, not just for Algeria, but its importance for the entire African continent. And then, of course, the final point that my takeaway is that the trade volumes between Algeria and other African countries, they have been rising steadily, but we can do more. And we can do more in terms of identifying specific sectors for export or import. I'm very encouraged that even without the involvement of the ZLECAF Secretariat, Uganda and Algeria were already discussing how to improve bilateral trade using ZLECAF as an instrument. Similarly, Algeria, Tanzania the export of products from Tanzania to Algeria, export of milk from Uganda to Algeria using ZLECAF as an instrument. All of these the point to the desire to enhance trade and investment relations between Algeria and other countries in Africa. And these are my three most important takeaways from this visit.
Algeria within the Secretariat, what's the impact you expect given its location, given its natural resources, and given its implication and involvement in this promising project?
Algeria, as I noted earlier in my statement, is a founding member of the Organization of African Unity. And as such, has always been a leading Pan-Africanist country. Now, that demonstrates a long-standing commitment to an integrated Africa and the values of and the ambitions of the Organization of African Unity. Now is the time for us to translate that Pan-Africanism into real commercial opportunities in establishing an integrated market.
Still, you mentioned an important word for me, it's trade. You know that in one of previous interviews, you said that now Africans can use their local currencies when trading with others.
Yes.
An Egyptian in Cairo can trade with someone in South Africa. He pays in Egyptian pound, while the South African can pay in the local currency rand. Is this a step forward towards a common currency and a single market? Why not very soon?
Let me start with the single market. If you look at the instruments, the protocols of ZLECAF that have been negotiated and concluded so far, the protocol on investment, protocol on intellectual property rights, on competition, all of these different protocols establish a legal basis for a common market. So actually we've made giant strides in establishing a common market in Africa. Very, very similar to the European Union in its trajectory of integration. So we've advanced significantly. I believe that when you look at all of this legal architecture, you already have a common market.
Yeah.
Regarding the common currency, that continues to be an objective of the African Union. It continues to be an objective that we pursue, but of course we know it's going to take a long time.
Any comment or any remark you want to add before we conclude and wrap up the interview? Any questions I have not asked you and you want to evoke by the end of this special interview?
Well, my final observation would be that the next edition of the Intra-Africa Trade Fair, as you know, will be here in Algeria in 2025. And we look forward to receiving Africans in their thousands to participate, to exhibit in the Intra-Africa Trade Fair. We very much appreciate the commitment of the government, the commitment of the Algerian government to make sure that it becomes a success. We know that the government has already invested resources to make sure that it becomes a success. For example, the government is investing in a new conference and exhibition center. This is a demonstration of commitment to make sure that the Intra-Africa Trade Fair is a success. So I would say as a final observation that there are millions of Africans who are looking forward to participating in the trade fair, and we know that the government of Algeria will be an excellent host for our businesses and for our exhibitors in 2025.
Mr. Wamkele Mene, it was a great pleasure for me to receive you here in Algeria. I wish you all success in the future, and to see you soon here in Algeria. Success for the Secretariat and for the Africans in this new initiative. End of our interview. Thanks very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this interview. Keep tuning to our channel, and bye-bye for now.